So, who has comments of a general nature? I suggest that if you have questions for individual speakers, you should seek them out. Let's just take 5 minutes for general discussion. Yes, please.
So actually, I'm wondering, because we're talking about capacity building all the time, and I'm really struck by the fact that we miss totally agency of stakeholders and empowerment. So what's in there for them? So because it's looking like you know, you're coming there being the scientist, and then you give information, okay, and then it's put into practice, and then it's going to be or going to become knowledge somehow. But how does it transform them? Does it go any further? Are they the people who gather this information? Do they have some kind of agency themselves? And how do they shape the process actually?
Good question. You have a guess?
For me, it's a belief is that science needs to fit in a bigger process of change, and it's not only in different time frames of the process. Science will have a different intention to do. And I think that the main thing is that we need to engage with the community working and find out their needs and their passion, and try to. But we always say we do quick fixes of policy kind of changes, and we think that's enough. But what we need to do is connect, and it's maybe a little bit fuzzy and maybe crazy, but I think we need to connect with that inner space where these people are operating from, and see what their challenges are. Look at yourself. When you create profound change in yourself, it's a moment that you connect with yourself, and that's what we need to do with this kind of processes. That it's not just we saying to change, but they believe that they need to change. I think that's a big difference. We cannot come in and tell them to change. We need to set up a process that they come to us. Gee, man, I need to restore this landscape. I need to help my children out. That's, I think, the change we need to create.
That's like, if I just could have a quick comment on that, because we're just facing that in Benin and West Africa too. It's like, you know, you give some information and you say, okay, come on, let's go to, I don't know, to the Ministry of Health and to discuss about traditional healing stuff. And it's always like they're grabbing on us, being the white guys, you know, it's just like, okay, you just accompany me, and then it works. And it's just really, I think there's empowerment, and then people understanding they have an agency, and then don't have to be accompanied by white people to get the things done. And I think this is really crucial, actually, because I think you have experienced that too, that when you end the project, it's ended. Yeah. So, and then what happens after it? So to have some kind of sustainability of knowledge, transformative processes and stuff. So that would be great.
We have a poster downstairs where we try to explain. We see some graffiti.
Well, the concern I have is that most of the programs or most of the networks that I've seen being presented, they all seem to have a time frame attached to them. And well, what you're just raising, that once the time frame elapses, everything else falls, because you don't know when a process is going to produce the desired result. And I see a network as an opportunity to work on the process rather than the actual or traditional outcomes that people look for
Just directly in our example or in others, you are more and more asked to actually have a sustainability aspect of it. So after the funding is gone, you already needed to develop a link to an institution which is independent of this direct funding. So I fully agree with you, otherwise it's just project after project and we don't learn enough from it.
We have 3 speakers.
May I
1, 2, 3. Specifically to this? Yes?
Well, I think also with this concept of community practice, it will be self-sustaining and is not time limited. I think you're right, for everything is time, so budgets will end, but for the community practice, people get something out of it, and they put something in it, of course, but when they get enough out of it, they can also continue the community practice without funding or whatever. So for this community I was talking about, there's no real funding. People are just participating because they're willing to learn, willing to share, and gaining something from that. And by gaining something from it, there's enough motivation to keep it going. And of course, it will end sometime, maybe next year, maybe in 10 years, but that's not so important.
Right. Yes, please.
I have a different concern, which I think is rather a mindset of questions to the audience as such, not particular presenters. We have two contradictory processes. On the one hand, we want to have more adaptive, more local solutions, more adaptive governance, more case studies on the ground. We have local languages developing in these working groups and teams. On the other hand, we want to have this million-dollar question solved on how to be more comparable. Is that not a big contradiction? I mean, how do we deal with that? I mean, does it make sense to make comparisons on very different topics or scales?
Yes, please.
That direction. I have exactly been working on that issue, which I call the standardization paradox. There is on the one hand, there is a need for common language, and comparability and global applicability, because ecosystem services are a global topic, and the nations have to work together on climate change, which is a global topic. But on the other hand, we need to consider the local conditions and to evolve and to make a collaborative learning processes from the ground. So what I think is the solution is to have a standardized procedure, which has some common language that also the standard evolves and improves in a continuous process, and that then can be used by collaborative learning organizations, and they can elaborate their own context and their own motivation within this standardized framework. That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I call landscape quality management, and I think if you first establish the continuous management and collaborative learning process, and then the science feeds in to that concrete network, I think that's a better approach than having first scientific big EU projects, and you have to have always regional case studies in this, but then when the project ends, then what do the people do? I think it's better to first establish that process and then have science feed into that. But it's good to have some standardized and common language and common concept on that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was wondering, seeing all these different networks how cost effective are they? And is it considered in designing these networks, this cost effectiveness? I've been involved in trying to measure some kind of transaction costs, as economists call it, of different kinds of institutional arrangements, of different kinds of networks. It's quite, I also realize it's rather difficult, but I think you need to be aware that how much you spend, how much budget you spend, and how much effect you can reach via your network.
I think the same, but council nature is not, we cannot account for it, it's too big. It's the same for social capital. How can we start valuing that I have a good relation with somebody, that we share information, that we get inspired? How can you value that? Why are we even trying to value it? We know it's needed.
No, I understand, I agree on this aspect, but we have a limited budget. The first project had a budget of 14 million, the second of 300,000 pounds. You have to, somebody has to decide where to spend the money.
Other comments? Anyone else have something to contribute? Yes.
I just had a board when I saw all these maps of networks and where the contributors come from. I'm really lacking East Europe, for instance. So where are those partnerships? Because it's looking like everyone's got, you know, all the more civilized, more Western industrial whatever countries. Where's Romania? And because when you look at things that just currently occur, like, I don't know, PFOCs are just, I don't know, depleted in Romania in order to feed, I don't know, German energy demands and stuff like that. So there's lots of connections and they're just not taken into consideration.
Yes, that's a good point. Perhaps related to money as well. Those people have more difficulty getting to meeting.
So we have to fund them. So.
Right. I know of a nice example of a Dutch-Polish partnership. Restoration ecologists in Groningen have been working in Poland for quite some time. Capacity building, training, and collaborative work on some projects there. So maybe pairing up can be useful in some cases. But as for networking, it's an ongoing challenge. Well, thank you all very much. I hope that it was useful and that some networking outcomes will arise spontaneously from this meeting. Thank you to all the speakers, and thank you all for your participation.